This happened my senior year of college over a year ago. I lived in a college neighborhood, surrounded by other kids that went to my school, with the exception of a family or two. We knew our neighbors well and everyone was fairly civil with one another. We did keep in mind though that this was a college area, and some sketchy things could happen. I think it was May when the first break-in happened. I woke up one morning to some texts in my group message telling me that my next door neighbor's house had been broken into. They had multiple things stolen. A backpack with a laptop and textbooks inside, a gaming console, etc. They had notified the police and they were on the case. This obviously set my roommates and I into a little bit of a panic because we were a house of 4 girls, and none of us being wildly brave by any means. We decided the best that we could do was to make sure our doors were locked at all times, whether we were home or not. And so that's what we did. Flash forward to a couple of days later. My roommates Maggie and I were the only 2 home out of the 4 who lived in our house. We stayed up late watching movies as we always did, and then I headed off to my room to go to bed, while Maggie stayed on the couch. We were, I'm not pleased to admit, the worst at turning off the lights and saving electricity. So this night, the light in the kitchen, living room, and hallway were all on. Sorry, I know, we got better about turning lights off eventually. I slept soundly through the night, and woke up as the sun shone through the cracks in my blinds the next morning. As usual, after I woke up I spent about 10 minutes in bed on my phone before getting up to use the bathroom. On my way back into my bedroom, I noticed that my blinds were tapping slightly against my window frame, suggesting that there was a breeze. My fan was off and my window was closed, so there should be no movement, right? Well, right, if my window had been closed. When I drew open my blinds, I was absolutely horrified to see that my bedroom window had been completely open all night. Or at least since after I had gone to sleep. I knew that my window was shut when I went to sleep the night before, and there is something wildly unsettling about the fact that my bed is also pushed up on the wall right against my window. So perfectly in fact that I used to sit in my window on my bed, with my feet able to touch the grass below. That's how low the window is, and that's how close my bed is. Now at this point, I was frantic. I ran out into the living room to see if Maggie was okay and if she had noticed anything or heard anything throughout the night. She wasn't home and I assumed she had gone to class. I texted her immediately explaining what had happened and asking her all of my questions. She responded lightning fast. She had woken up this morning in the living room, and when she walked into her bedroom to get ready for class, her window was open. Her desk, which sits right in front of her window, was pushed away from the wall, and her closet doors, which were always open because they jutted right up against the carpet, so they were pretty hard to open and close. They were closed. She said it looked exactly as though someone had pushed her desk away from the window to give themselves more room to enter quietly. In an absolute frenzy, I texted my other roommates, who hadn't been home, and my group message alerting them of what had happened. I crawled the house to see if any of my things were missing, and when my roommates came home later that day, they did the same thing. Nothing had been stolen, not even my laptop or my phone, which were both charging on my bed, right in front of the window. Not even Maggie's Apple Watch that was sitting on her desk in front of her window. We did call the police and they came to file the report, but they never followed up with us about it. I asked if they could dust my window for prints, as there had to have been handprints because the only way to open my window from the outside is to press your palms directly on the glass and push upward with significant force. But they never followed through with doing that either. I'm not sure really what to think of this, as maybe it was a planned break-in, but they didn't think I would be asleep in their point of entry. But they entered, we think, through another window nonetheless. So why didn't they take anything? And how did the sounds not wake us up? I was directly next to my window, so they would have had to jump over my body to enter my room. So I don't think they did enter from there at least, which is a little relieving. Maybe they didn't enter at all because the lights were all on, and they realized that people were home. But our cars were in the driveway, and it did seem as though they had entered because Maggie's closet doors were shut. This was bizarre to me. I'm just relieved that I've since moved out of that house. I'm pretty annoyed that the police didn't take it very seriously, but at least I'm also a little relieved that the people who broke in and I never had to meet. This happened a few years ago, in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days. Like I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I had put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor and stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat. Or so I thought. Well, one night I woke up at around 1 in the morning, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, I was sure that I had woken up from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower. So I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never closed it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it. And a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection on my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed with that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot, and a few seconds later, steam was rising and the water hurt my feet flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind. It was a woman, and she screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it close behind me. A little later, she started banging on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God. I called the cops and I went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing, and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to be the former person living in the flat, and was evicted after not paying rent. It seems she had made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work, and sometimes at night. It's possible that what woke me up in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. Hi everyone, I'm finally going to tell you all about what happened to me 4 years ago. At that time, I was 17, and I was living for a few years in a small house with my mom after my parents divorced 6 years ago. The house wasn't huge, but we had one floor with our bedrooms and a small garden. We also have a dog who isn't really scary. It's one of those small dogs with a lot of hair. His biggest default is that he barks a lot during the daytime every time someone is closed from the garden. That annoyed me and my neighbors a lot. It's important to notice that my dog never barks at night, and always sleeps with me in my bed. Anyway, one night in the middle of the night, I had a dream where I heard a constant dog barking. In my dream, I felt like it lasted 1,000 years, but I think it only lasted for a few seconds. When I woke up out of that nightmare, I didn't feel the weight of my dog on my feet. I felt like something was wrong and then realized my dog was actually barking and growling. I didn't understand what was happening. I just looked for my dog and saw him on the top of the stairs, his head turned towards the front door. The door opening the garage was actually on the side of the front door. I jumped out of bed and I rushed to the top of the stairs where my dog was. There was the shadow of a man standing just at the bottom of the stairs next to the front door. I wasn't even able to shout. I just took my dog in my arms by reflex and ran towards my mom's room. My mom was just waking up at this point. She takes medication to sleep, so it's very hard to wake her up. Thank God, the door to her bedroom could be locked with a key. Even though I was shaking like hell, I locked the door. My mom then understood what was happening when we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. We froze in the corner of her bedroom and she grabbed her phone to call the police. While we were trying to reach the cops, the guy started shaking the door handle and then punching the door. After a moment he stopped, and the psycho laughed. And that's when my mom had the good idea of shouting, "I called the police, get out." After a moment, we heard him going down the stairs, still laughing. We didn't dare to move until we heard the police officers. When they arrived, no one was there. In the kitchen, on the table, there was a note where he wrote, "See you soon." That's how I translated it because the original note was in French. They said later that apparently the guy got in and out by my garage, which has a back door that at the time we always left opened. Immediately after that, we went to live with my grandparents for a while, and moved out into a new house a couple months later. We never heard from this guy again, but we always check every door to make sure that it's locked before going to bed, and I've had trouble sleeping ever since. For almost a year after that, I waited until it was 4 a.m. to go to sleep, just to be sure he didn't find us and try to sneak into our home again. To give you a little background, I have a nervous tic where I laugh the most awkward and inappropriate moments. I've always said that I would probably laugh even if someone is causing me physical harm. And now to the actual story. My family and I owned a small business in a not-so-great part of town. One day, I was just eating my sandwich and watching The Young and the Restless as I did every day with a coworker. Also, we were the only two there at the time. I looked up and I saw a figure peering through our display window, but I assumed they were just checking out the awesome display my mom put up there, because sometimes people only came to see what creative display she had come up with for that season. They suddenly opened the door and shut it, and I thought that was odd, so I stand up to see what's going on. And that's where I see a tall figure with a full-face bandana mask on, with only eyes and a mouth cut out. He comes through the door and demands us to give him the money. Naturally, I freak out, but I've always been told to just give them what they want and don't protest it, which is what I'd planned on doing. The next thing I know, my coworker stands up and says, "Run," as she is running towards the back. So I was like, okay, and I ran too. I went through the back door assuming she was right behind me, and I get all the way to the back of the driveway and I turn around to see that she's not there, so then I start panicking like, where is she? I'm just standing there like a dummy because I honestly don't even know what to do at this point, and I'm still trying to process what the heck just happened. I started walking down to the bank on the road beside us to tell them to call the cops since I left my cell phone inside. And then I hear a deep voiced man say, "Take me to the money," in a hateful tone. I turn around and there's a man pointing a gun at me, so I just say okay, while freaking out obviously, and I go with him. I then start laughing like some kind of crazy person and he gets agitated. He then yells at me to walk faster with the gun pointed at my back, so I tell him that I'm sorry, which why the hell should I be? So I give him the whole $50 that we had in our register, and he takes me to the back and tells me to stand there and count to 20. So I do what he says, and then I yell for my coworker trying to figure out where the heck she went. Like, did they have her or what? No worries though, she was safe hiding in the bathroom. The cops never found who did it, but they didn't actually seem too concerned since he only got $50. Never mind the fact that someone had to go through a traumatic experience. Also, a side note, I had posted on Facebook that I would probably say I'm sorry to someone even if they were trying to rob me 2 days before this happened. Luckily, this was a while ago, and I have less anxiety about it than I used to. Although, all these people wearing these bandana masks due to COVID put me on edge lately. So did the robber who held a gun on me for $50. Let's not meet again. First off, I'm not the greatest at telling stories, so please bear with me. I'm not sure if this belongs here since it wasn't exactly creepy, but extremely scary. When I was 14, I met a guy named James. He was 17. I dated him for 5 years. I'm 30 now. I grew up very poor to a teenage mother. I never met my father until I was 20. I made some pretty bad choices as a young lady. James was a big-time drug dealer, and at the time I found that thrilling and so cool. It was a typical abusive relationship. He cheated on me a lot, would physically, mentally, and emotionally abuse me. He would then buy me things or gave me money to make it all better. Unfortunately at the time, I didn't know any better or had a poor self-esteem. His money took me away from my poor home life, so I stayed for 5 years. This happened when I was 17. James and his brother Victor bought a house in a really nice neighborhood. Victor was a single guy, the player type. He had a random girl over visiting that night. James and I were going to bed. It was about midnight. Victor and his new girl left the house and took James' vehicle. James and I were alone in the house. About 2 minutes after Victor left, we heard a knock at the door. James gets up and says, "Oh, he must have forgotten his keys." I'm in bed and I hear James say, "You have the wrong house. Sorry, buddy." He comes running into the room, telling me to close the door. As we hear the door getting kicked down, 2 men enter the house. One was wearing a bandana over his face. The other guy I didn't recognize. He wasn't trying to hide his identity. They started kicking down the bedroom door as we did our best to hold our weight against it. We were screaming and begging them to leave. At one point, the bandana guy got his arm and leg through the door. I made eye contact with him. He dropped his sawed-off shotgun. I reached for it and he seemed to back off a little bit. The other guy grabbed the gun. Out of fear, I couldn't recognize him, but I felt something in the stare that he gave me. We thought they were after drugs and money. We had no weapons. The money and drugs were in a separate bedroom. They didn't take anything. It wasn't a robbery. They were there to give someone a beating. James was on the phone with the police the whole time this was happening. The guys took off. It was time to check what they took and hide the drugs. The police came, and we noticed a bullet hole in the wall in the bedroom, directly beside the room that we were in. I found out later it was caused by the bandana guy hitting the gun out of the other guy's hand as he tried to shoot me through the door. I went home the next day completely traumatized, not wanting to tell my family about anything that had happened. They all gossip. I walked in the door and my grandmother knew about the home invasion. My family knew James was a drug dealer and they weren't concerned. I thought at the time someone who James knew must have known someone in my family, since she had a female cousin tell her. My cousin, Anthony's wife, called me saying, "Anthony wants to say he's sorry, but you weren't supposed to be there." Again, I was dumb and assumed someone in the thug world had told them. We lived in a small city. I was so naive and was convinced it was a robbery from a rival drug dealer. That wasn't the case at all. We spent weeks waiting for them to come back, and James made sure he always had a few scary guys with guns in the house. I realize now that this only added to the trauma. A few months after this happens, I'm at James' house reading the newspaper. I see my cousin Anthony and another guy in the most wanted section. The other guy looked vaguely familiar. Anthony is gang-related. We're the same age and grew up extremely close. Although he got locked up at age 13, and had been on and off ever since, Anthony and I would write to each other. We had a strong bond. The phone rings and it's a girl named Cindy that is completely in love with Victor, but since he's a player, he treats her like crap. She brings up the mugshots in the paper and says, "That's your cousin, right?" She confesses to me that the home invasion was because of her. The other guy in the mugshot liked her. My cousin Anthony was his friend. They made her tell them where Victor lived, and they watched the house until they saw what they thought was me and James leaving. She was apologizing profusely, begging me not to tell James. I didn't. I knew if I told him, he would have her shot also because it was my cousin. I assumed I would get some blame or have to show James thugs where my cousin lived. Regardless of what he did, I'm stupidly loyal to my family. I saw Anthony at a family function a few years later. He said that he was sorry and that he loves me, and that it wasn't his fault. That was 13 years ago. My life is completely different now. I am an upstanding member of society, but I still feel a lump in my throat when I talk about it. This took place almost exactly 8 years ago when I was 21 and a senior in college. I went to school in Boston and lived off campus in an apartment in a neighborhood full of college kids. For those of you who also went to school in Boston, I'm sure you know which neighborhood I'm referring to. I lived in an apartment with 3 other roommates. That was an old house that was split up into separate units, with 3 units in total, 1 on each floor. Our place was on the top floor, which I'm sure used to be an attic, since it had slanted walls in each room. Like many old houses in Boston, this one had 2 staircases, one main one in the front and a sort of service staircase in the back that had access to each unit and the back porch. The other 2 apartments had real doors to the back stairwell with deadbolts, but our door, which was in my roommate's bedroom, and worked out perfectly because he would go outside to smoke, had kind of a tiny hobbit door. It also worked out perfectly because he was short, and had only a latch lock and nothing else. Not the best security, to say the least. It was Christmas break and I was returning from an 8 to 10 hour drive away with my cat in tow, who wouldn't stop meowing for the whole ride. About a week before all of my roommates because I had to be back at work before classes started. Our neighbors in the other apartments were also all students who had went home for the holidays, and basically the entire neighborhood itself was empty for the same reason. As I arrived at probably 1 or 2 a.m., happy that I was finally home and didn't have to listen to incessant meowing. Have you ever tried to plead with a cat for your sanity? It doesn't work. I had a weird feeling and noticed a draft coming from my roommate's room. Turns out the hobbit door was busted wide open. Since we were all dumb college kids at the time and didn't have concern for our own safety, I assumed he just went out to smoke before leaving and forgot to shut the door behind him. I continued on to my room and let the kitty out, and noticed that my jewelry box was open, and then that every drawer in my dresser was open, and every drawer in the plastic drawers in my closet were open. I checked the jewelry box, and although I didn't own anything of value, nothing was taken. I go and check out my roommate's rooms and it's the same thing. Every drawer, box, and closet open, but from what I can tell, their contents remained untouched. The kitchen drawers with the silverware were left wide open too. Needless to say, I was pretty shaken and freaked out, since when you're that age you tend to think that nothing like that will happen to you, even if you live in the city. But from what I could tell, nothing had been taken from the apartment. Our TV was there, and my roommate's desktop. We all had our laptops while we were away. Sadly, we didn't really have much of value. A burglar broke into our house and decided we must have not had anything good to steal. I called the police and they filed a report. Of course, thinking the whole thing was funny and making a joke about it. Maybe they stole a fork from the silverware drawer because they were really hungry. Great dad joke. It turns out that after our first floor neighbors returned, they said they had noticed that the window off the front porch was left cracked open and unlocked, and their door leading to the back stairwell was open from the inside. So whoever it was went up to the third floor and easily kicked a good old hobbit door open, and had fun looking at all of our crappy stuff. The best part that we learned from our neighbors is that, before they left a brand new DVD of Gone with the Wind that one of them had received as a Christmas gift on the coffee table. They were 100% sure that it was not opened before they left, and they all left together since they were from the same hometown. The DVD had been opened and was in the DVD player, and they noticed that their couch cushions and pillows looked like somebody had been laying down. So too, whoever broke into my apartment decided that there was nothing good to steal, and then proceeded to kick back and watch an almost 4-hour cinematic masterpiece. Let's not meet. This happened some hours ago. To give you a bit of context, I'm a male in my early 20s, and I live in an apartment on the second floor. I come back home from a New Year's Eve party around 6 a.m. I undress myself, text a couple of people, and then go to bed. All of this in a span of about 10 to 15 minutes. And then basically, as soon as I get into bed, I hear my doorbell ring. And not my actual door, but the gate to the apartment complex. Initially, I say forget it. It must be some drunk person or someone pulling a prank or being a dick. But then the guy keeps ringing very insistently. So I go on my boxers to answer the phone that is wired to the gate. I answer the phone and I hear a foreign-sounding guy that is trying to tell me something about a friend and keys and to let him in the complex. I think about it for a second and then I tell him, I don't really know you, so I'm not going to open the gate. I hang up and I go to bed again. They keep ringing very insistently, so I get up again and I go answer the phone, this time a bit angry. And I am greeted by a girl speaking perfect English. I live in Italy, and telling me in a very clear way that she is staying on the 5th floor, and her friend has the keys. That she is a woman alone in the street and to come check it at the door if I don't believe her. She sounded very convincing, to be honest. Mind you, in this moment, I'm drunk, high and very tired, trying to weigh my options. What if she really is a girl alone on the street at 6 a.m., in the cold with all the drunk people going around? What if she isn't, though? Fortunately, even in my intoxicated state, I have the idea to go out on the balcony over the gate and check out who is in the street. I throw on my parka because it's pretty cold, and in my boxers, I go out on the balcony to have an absolute forget you moment. There were 4 seedy-looking people, 2 male, 2 female if I saw correctly, right in front of the gate, talking quietly between themselves. And I yell at them. I shouldn't have done it. Oi, you want to come in? And immediately go inside to call the police and grab a knife. Yeah. The real scary thing is that my gate is not see-through. So if I went down, I wouldn't have seen outside, and as soon as I had opened the door, I would have been overpowered by them, and probably forced to let them in my apartment. This story pretty much ends there. Those people kept ringing the bell aggressively for another 15 minutes, while I took off the lights and went around my house like a drunken Rambo with a knife in my hand, checking periodically all the windows. I have windows on the internal courtyard and windows on the street, which they easily could have climbed, or so I thought. And then it all ended. I don't even know if the police saw anyone or came at all because I never heard from them, and I just went to bed after a solid hour of this. It was Christmas time. My wife and I were staying at her childhood home where her mother now lived all alone. Well, not if you include the cats. Meow. The house was on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburbs. If you're picturing freshly mowed lawns, American flags, and empty sidewalks, you're picturing it right. It's a single-story home with an attached garage out front. The garage has 2 doorways apart from the electric garage door, of course. One leads to the garden and backyard. This has an old doggy door from their days with dear old Max, R.I.P. Max, that they had covered with a piece of nailed-in wood. That had always made me slightly uncomfortable before, but I figured it had been that way for years, though what's the worst that could happen? The second door leads to the kitchen. Hollow core. It could stop a mouse, not much else. Definitely not something that I wanted in, or someone. We were asleep in my wife's childhood bedroom at the front of the house. 3 a.m. I was in that deep, dark recess of sleep. You know, you're in the diving bell, and you're submerged hundreds of meters below the surface in black water, protected from the real world by miles of nothingness. And then I heard it. The scream. "What are you doing?" It was my mother-in-law's voice echoing down the hallway. To me, lost in a sea of sleep, it sounded like a jet engine roaring past my eardrum. I bolted up. What happened next happened in a matter of seconds. But about that scream, even though I was dead asleep, I heard enough of it to make sense of the urgency behind it. This wasn't an, "Oh, you scared me" type of scream. This was different, and I knew it. Not consciously, but my lizard brain, that piece we retained from our primitive ancestors, knew something was wrong. I watch and read a fair amount of true crime, and this scream awakened that horrible fear. The one that says, "This can't really be happening to me, can it?" Honestly, in that second of the night, it sounded like someone was about to be murdered. You ever wonder if you're a fight or flight type of individual? I always have. And I came to know something about myself after this night. I'm a fighter. I leaped out of bed, growled. Yes, growled in the manliest voice that I could muster. "I'm gonna kill you," and took off running. I tore open the bedroom door and ran into the hallway. There, at the end, I saw my mother-in-law, nightgown on, look of utter shock on her face, standing still. We make eye contact as I continue towards her, and then she turns her head, looks directly into the kitchen. I hurry past her and round the corner into the kitchen. The hollow core door is obliterated, shards everywhere. I look through the open frame and see the electric garage door is open. I push ahead. As I run into the garage, I hear it. The sound of someone hopping into a car just out of view. Just as I make it onto the driveway, I see a car peeling out from the sidewalk adjacent to the house. But the adrenaline is still pumping. And who am I to say no to adrenaline? So, like an idiot, I run barefoot after the car. I give a good go. But I'm no Michael Johnson, and even he couldn't catch a speeding car. It soon vanishes down the street and I'm left all alone. The police showed up within 3 minutes, which, I have to say, make me feel a lot more at ease with my mother-in-law living there. They took our statements. My mother-in-law said that she had heard a noise, the hollow core door being kicked in, and walked into the kitchen where she had encountered the burglar, a small-framed woman. The police theorized that she was working as part of a team. Her job was to squeeze through the doggy door, kick in the hollow core, and open the electric garage door for her accomplice. According to the police, the burglars most likely thought nobody was home. Fortunately, my mother-in-law must have caught her off guard and scared her, in addition to my manly growl, of course. But it feels good to know that everyone was safe, and to learn that I guess I've got a little fight in me. And for the record, we bought the heaviest goddamn wooden door you would ever see to replace that hollow core. I would like to see a mouse try to get through that. This happened back while I was in college a couple years ago. Me and my roommates moved into a beautiful apartment our junior year of college. Our parents made it extremely clear that two small females living alone together was not ideal for some of the cheaper, shady neighborhoods close to our college. We attended a college in our state capital, so we were in a city environment, and had certain criteria we had to meet in order for us to live there, and for them to co-sign our leases as well. Lit sidewalks, keyed entry into the apartment building, a lit parking lot, X amount of blocks from campus, and so on. So we finally found one that fit our parents' criteria. Our apartment building had a keyed entry for both of the front of the building and the back gate that led to the fire escape. Our apartment was an end unit that led to the fire escape, so there was 2 deadbolt locks on it. We loved our apartment. We felt safe, we had fun, truly living the college experience. And then my roommate's boyfriend starts slowly moving his things into the apartment and staying there way more often than he should. I finally tell my roommate that if he wants to use the water, electric, and food that I help pay for, then he needs to pay for it too, including our rent. I tell her a 3-way split, or I'm paying only my rent and he can pay the entire electric, water, and trash bill. I think I'm being pretty fair, and even though her boyfriend doesn't have a job, that's not my problem. I work and go to college. I don't want to work at McDonald's. Yes, he actually said that. Excuse is completely garbage. If you want a place to stay, then to the Golden Arches you shall go, buddy. So instead, my roommate starts sneaking him in really late at night after I go to sleep, and he leaves on days that I'm home. While I'm in class, he's there, and then leaves before I come back. My schedule is extremely routine. Well, he can't have a key, so if my roommate is in class or at work, how is he getting in? He can't take my roommate's key because if he decides to leave halfway through the day, how will she get her key back? All good questions. The solution they had come up with is to leave the back door unlocked that leads to the fire escape, and then he can just jump the fence at the bottom of the fire escape to get back on the fire escape when he's ready to come back. Or stick a rock in between the door, whatever works for him. So I'm off of work and school one Thursday morning and decide I'm going to sleep in as long as I possibly can. My roommate and her boyfriend have already left for the day, so naturally they leave the door unlocked. I'm asleep like a pretty princess. It's about 10 in the morning when I hear the back door open to the apartment. I come to just enough to recognize the noise, realize it's my roommate or her boyfriend, and I brush it off and go try to drift back off. All of a sudden, I start hearing some creep through the apartment, wooden floors. It definitely doesn't sound like casual walking. It is clearly someone stepping slowly and quietly through the apartment. My door to my room is ajar just a sliver, but I don't see anything out of the door, and I'm honestly too tired to get up and look. A couple of minutes pass and I figure that my roommate and or her boyfriend are just being weirdos and I fall back asleep. I can't be sure how much time passes before I open my eyes, but it can't be too long. I wake up to my door opening. My back is to the door and I'm facing the opposing wall. I slowly start to turn over to see why my roommate or her boyfriend would dare wake me up from my slumber. And there he is. A burglar, in my room, next to the bed I'm currently laying in. A 6-foot-tall, 250-pound minimum burglar, unplugging my TV, about 5 feet from where I currently am. I immediately pretend I'm just shifting positions in my sleep, and continue to roll over with my eyes as shut as I could make them seem, still open enough to watch what was really going on. He hears me shuffling as I turn over, stops, looks dead at me, and luckily doesn't realize that my eyes are open just a tiny bit. He goes back to unplugging my TV, my DVD player, shoves it in a bag he's brought, like those bags from IKEA, and steals my change jar, and casually starts walking out the front door to my apartment, like he came in for a freaking cup of tea or something. After I hear the door shut, I immediately sprint out of bed, grab my phone, start dialing 911, all the while locking the back and front doors. The dispatcher is trying to calm me down. At this point, I am hysterical. I can't even catch my breath to tell her okay. Luckily, I told her my address before I started hyperventilating. Pause. I will take a second to commend the police department, both city and college, because they were there in less than 3 minutes. Resume. She tells me the cops are there, but they need me to go downstairs to let them in the building, because they don't have a key to the front door of the building. I am so afraid to open the door to my apartment and even look down the hallway. I'm about to walk to the front door and extend my arm out to the handle when I hear, "Ma'am, it's the police." As if I didn't get scared enough already, they yell through the door. I am paranoid because the dispatcher just told me that they couldn't get in, and didn't realize someone probably let them in downstairs. I asked the dispatcher to confirm that the people at my door are actually police officers. She tells me that they are at my door. Okay, cool. I open the front door and I collapse right there. My legs completely turn to jello and I just hit the floor. I blacked out for a brief period of time, but they held me up and sit me down on the couch. There are at least 10 officers in my apartment from both the city and college departments. When I look outside the living room window to the street below, there are 5 or 6 cop cars blocking the street. I later found out that they were doing a perimeter search around the immediate area. I'm being bombarded with questions now. I have to try to find out what's missing besides the stuff from my room. I'm crying, I'm shaking. This is not at all how I saw my day off going. I tell them that my roommate left the back door open for her boyfriend, and they inspect the back door and blah blah. The next thing I know, my roommate and her boyfriend walk in, and they both have the most dumbfounded looks on both of their faces. At this point now, there is a detective talking to me, and I'm giving my statement, giving a description of the burglar, the stuff missing, looking at mugshots, etc. I immediately stop talking to the detective, look up at both of them, and blurt out, "Somebody robbed us while I was asleep. He came into my room." My roommate looks me dead in the face and says, "My God, is any of my stuff gone?" That's really what you're asking me right now. If your replaceable stuff is missing. 2 officers take her and her boyfriend aside and talk to them while I'm finishing up with the detective. I call my then boyfriend and he comes over to help me pack my stuff to stay over at his house for a couple of days, which turned into staying until my lease at my place had ended, around 4 months. After failing to recognize any suspects in a lineup, the cops slowly start leaving. After they all leave, I call my parents to tell them what has happened, gather my things and head over to my boyfriend's house. My roommate and her boyfriend never once apologized. Not for leaving the door unlocked, but just a general, "I'm sorry this happened to you" type of apology. They never asked me if I was okay, if I wanted to talk, nothing. The day my lease ended was the best day of that entire year. I couldn't wait to get away from my roommate, her boyfriend, and that apartment. They never found the guy who robbed me that day. I didn't even care about the materialistic things. He robbed me of my safety and security, and it took a good amount of counseling to get that back. I'm also thankful he didn't try to attack me that morning. My friendship with my roommate was tarnished. I haven't spoken to her since. To this day, I don't sleep with my back to the door, and I always have a knife under my mattress.